Hello and welcome to FI for Kids, a podcast about guiding your kids on the path to financial independence and extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Dominic DeLaquil. Our guest today is Eric Brotman, the CEO of BFG Financial Advisors and the author of Don't Retire, Graduate. Eric believes that financial literacy is the key to well-being, and he's on a mission to help families and professionals achieve financial freedom. We're going to talk about the book, how Eric defines retire, and how planning for your future isn't something you do at 25 or 45 or even 65. It's a journey that starts at any age and continues throughout life. So welcome, Eric, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here.
So let's start with what you learned about money when you were a kid growing up.
Well, I learned first and foremost none of it formally. With the exception of in third grade, I do remember learning how to write a check and balance a checkbook. That was about the extent of which is better than nothing. That was about the extent of my financial literacy education was in third grade. I did not learn money lessons at home. In fact, if anything, I sort of learned what not to do at home. Money was a source of consternation at times. And I did not grow up in a moneyed household at all. And so while we never missed a meal, and I certainly was middle class, we were not in a position to have extras. And so, I think I learned that it was important to buy things on sale. I think I watched my folks sort of navigate it. And it was not, I won't say it was paycheck to paycheck, but I think it probably was pretty close.
Yeah. So you learned kind of to be thrifty.
Yeah, but I also learned that I didn't want to be. I learned that I didn't want to have to be. So
Sure.
I think part of the grit and the work ethic that I took into and I always had a job. At 12, I was mowing lawns. At 14, I was flipping burgers. At 15, I was stocking shelves at a clothing store. I did internships at law firms and brokerage firms, and graduated from college early to avoid a semester's worth of tuition, and was in a hurry I don't know why, but I was in a hurry to reach the workforce. I think I wanted to make a living, but I also didn't realize that adulting's a trap and no one should actually do it. So at the time, I was in a hurry to be independent, and that has served me.
Yeah. So I want to come back to that in just a second, but just backing up a little bit, just to clarify. So it sounds like then money wasn't something that you sort of observed things, but it wasn't something you talked about. There were no financial lessons. It wasn't a topic really in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I won't say there were financial lessons. I will say that I did everything I could to actually earn some of my own money, even at 12 and 13 and 14. To suggest that I put any of it away, I didn't. I spent it on pizza. But at least I had it and didn't have to ask for money to do those things. And so there was a teenage freedom that came from having, something in my wallet that I had earned, which I've always considered a good thing. And as a parent, it's now the pendulum is swinging in a very interesting way because my daughter's being raised a very different way than I was, and it creates a new set of challenges. I mean, every family's unique.
Yeah. Well, and that just makes me think, and that's kind of sort of the impetus for this podcast in many ways. So you're that kid, you were working when you were in your teens, and so was I. And I didn't really sort of get much financial advice from my parents. I mean, I learned a lot of things from them, and my dad in particular was really good at teaching things, but money just wasn't something that we talked about. Mm-hmm. And so again, I had money coming in, but then I spent all of it. And how much nicer would it have been to know just a little bit at a younger age and learn those basic habits of spend less than you make so you can start to invest some and make it work for you. But that just wasn't something that was part of my reality. And that's not a diss on them. I think that's still to this day so common, but I think it can benefit kids a lot if there's a conversation there. So before we talk about kind of how things are, how the pendulum has swung the other way now with your daughter, you mentioned something in there about that you wanted to be independent and how that served you well. Talk about that for a second.
I never wanted to be in a position where I had to ask anyone for financial help. Asking for help, I think, is a great thing. And requesting help and expertise and guidance and mentorship and coaching and all of those things, and even therapy, whatever it means to get accountability and to get help, I think is an important thing. Financially, I wanted to be in a position to make my own choices, to sort of drive my own destiny, to choose where I was going to live, how I was going to live. I put nothing away until I got my very first job out of school. I really had saved nothing through school. I didn't run up debt, but I also didn't put anything away. And, would that matter to me today? Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. I know that when I got my first set of employee benefit documents with my first real job, I was totally overwhelmed. They give you a 120-page thing and say, we need this back Friday, pick all these things. And of course, the first thing I did was ask my dad what to choose, and God love him, but he gave me awful advice. I chose all the wrong stuff that I didn't need at the time, and things that and it wasn't his fault. I really don't think that was something that, I don't blame him for that. He was trying to help. He wanted me to have the best health insurance. Well, but when you're 21, you don't need the more expensive health insurance. You can do other things.
Right.
Because ideally, unless you have some extenuating circumstances, you're not spending a lot on health care in your 20s, God willing. So there were just some choices that made more sense for a 55-year-old than a 21-year-old when I was making them.
Yeah.
And if I had had even some basic training on this, I think it would have been better for me. But the independence factor was real. And if it meant working multiple jobs, if it meant overtime, if it meant negotiating for myself, I only lasted in corporate America for about a year. I despised it. I didn't like being on a salary. I wanted to be able to earn whatever. I wanted an upside. I wanted to go into sales and grow where I could work harder and make more money. It didn't matter how hard I worked on a salary.
Yeah.
You're only going to get noticed so much. You're going to get cost of living increases and an attaboy every now and again, but you're not going to, that's not the way to build wealth, generally speaking, at least not early on. So I wanted to control my destiny, and I wanted to control what I could earn, and I wanted to know that if I worked 70 hours a week, I was making enough of a living where that felt like a win and it didn't feel like a grind.
Yeah, yeah. I want to maybe come back around to that a little bit later, because that idea of working a bunch, but if it's something that you care about, and I know that ties into your definition of retire,
Entirely,
I think makes that feel completely different than if you're working 70 hours for someone else and you're just strictly trading your time for money. But one of the other things that you mentioned, that I think you gave that example of getting the best health insurance when you're 21. And I think that's a good example of how money touches all aspects of our lives, and being able to think about those financial decisions in the context of the overall bigger picture of your life and where you're at in life is something that can be really valuable. And that kind of gets to your point of, the path to financial freedom really is just that. It's a path. It's a journey. You should be thinking about it when you're 21, when you're 30s, 40s, 60s. And it's always changing, like everything else in life. And I just think that's such a great example, because, right, that's a good way to think about the financial decision around what you're going to pay for health insurance. At 21, you don't need the best because you're unlikely to use it. You could do something smarter with that money.
Yeah, there was a stock purchase plan with a discount. Like I could have taken the less expensive health insurance option and put a small amount of money in stock with a 10% discount and had it grow into something. Now, would I still have it today? Who knows? But it would certainly have been toward the wealth building journey. I also never lived at home after college, and a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And I don't disparage those who do if they have a plan around it and if it's a family decision. I don't think there's anything wrong with living home for a year or two to be able to sock some money away if, in fact, that's what you do. It's different than sort of staying on mom and dad's couch till you're 37. But if there's a plan around it and you want to build that nest egg, or you want to get rid of a student loan, or you want to prepare, and you have a family dynamic that allows you to do that, I don't disparage that at all. But I was in a hurry to live on my own. It meant getting a roommate. My rent was $610 a month. I had to split it with somebody, and I was terrified by it. So, it was, these weren't big numbers, but it was 1994, and it felt scary to me at the time. I instead of putting away a lot of money, I chose the independence route and said I'd rather have a roommate than have to boomerang back. Again, whether that's the best decision looking back 30 plus years now, I don't think it matters very much. I think some of these decisions we labor over are not going to be life-changing, but they're good habits to form. And it's good to be able to think about those decisions and to have choices. So if you are a college student right now, if you're a junior or senior in college and you're getting your undergraduate education, whether you're blessed to not have student loans or whether you've taken some debt on, If you're in a position to be financially independent right away with a first job, that's wonderful. Many young people aren't. Even with a first job, they're not independent financially necessarily. They're in a reasonably good shape potentially, but not fully independent. It's okay to say, hey, mom and dad, can I stay with you guys for a year or two? There was only one time in my life when I actually lived with one of my parents as an adult, and it was when I got divorced. I was 28 years old. And I lived at my mother's, and I insisted on paying rent. And the true story, because I didn't want it to be her little boy wasn't coming home. That's not what this was. It was, I'm literally renting a room, I paid rent, and I had to pay for HBO because they didn't have it, and I wanted to watch The Sopranos. That's a true story.
Hey, well, you got to have your priorities, right? So
that was an important decision at the time.
Hey, I would support that decision. That's a great show. Anyway, well, and I think that's a good example too, Eric, of how the path, there's no one right path, right? And there's even not any one right path for one individual. I mean, so, as we go through life with finances and all relationships and all kinds of things, part of what makes life interesting and moves you along and helps you grow and make you better is you make mistakes along the way. Hopefully they're not too catastrophic. But also when you make those mistakes when you're younger, you've got more time to weather those and recover from those, right? I mean, so you were driven by being independent, and that was something that was important to you. That I would say I was similar in that regard. Like I really wanted to be out on my own, and that's perfectly valid. I've got some good friends who they have set up a apartment in their basement, and they've made the offer to their kids, and a couple of their kids so far have taken advantage of this. Of all right, you're finished with college, you can come back and you can stay here rent free. But the idea is you're saving up money to go get yourself a house. Now, if you're showing up with a brand new car in the driveway, then you're going to have to start paying rent. But if you're using this, like you were saying, to get yourself ahead, then we're happy to help. And they've had a couple of their kids that have taken advantage of that, and that's worked out great for them. So no one right way. It just depends on who you are and what your options are, and you find the best way to make things work for you at the time.
Well, and you said it best when you said you're going to make mistakes and hopefully they're not catastrophic. I try not to make the same mistake twice, but I reserve the right to make all new mistakes and sometimes make them wildly. As I get older, as I'm hopefully mature, my daughter would say I've never matured, but I think there's some wisdom there somewhere. And if you can avoid the third rail, avoid the life-altering mistake, the iceberg, if you will, in the journey, if you can avoid the big one, and you can just sort of let the tide move you a little bit and you make decisions the best you can along the way, I think most of us are going to be fine. It's when you do something from which you cannot recover that there is an emergency situation. But in the absence of that, in the absence of the really big mistake, but just about anything else, we're pretty resilient as a species. We can do this.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. So let's talk then about your daughter. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to know kind of what you're teaching her about money. And also then you mentioned kind of her upbringing has been very different from yours. So kind of wrap that into your thoughts about what you're teaching her and how her struggles are different from yours.
Well, I made an effort to teach her the value of money at a young age. And she approached her mother and me at one point and said she'd like an allowance. And I didn't want it to be a handout. I wanted it to be for some age-appropriate things around the house. And so we came up with a plan, and we came up with a couple things that were age-appropriate. I think she was about 8 or 9 years old. And we came up with an allowance plan. And at the time, the allowance was $5 a week. And it was 5 $1 bills. And we took her to a craft store, and we had her buy 3 jars, and then we had her label them and decorate them and everything else. And one of the jars was marked long-term, one was marked charity, and one was marked fun. And I said, every week, I'm going to give you 5 $1 bills, assuming you do the things you say you're going to do. I'll give you 5 $1 bills. At least $1 has to go into charity every week. At least $1 has to go into long-term every week. And the other $3 you can put anywhere you want. And I watched this sort of as a social experiment where early on, $3 always hit the fun jar. But there came a point where she started putting monies into some of the other things, and I was curious as to why that was. And, she said, I have enough money here for fun. I'm good. I want to do some other things. So at the end of a year, I took her to the bank, literally physically to the bank, to open an account. And I had her take the long-term money and establish an account. I matched it dollar for dollar, so she learned a little bit about that. We established a savings account for her, very simple. We also went online and searched for appropriate charities that she wanted to support, and she got to choose what that was. Again, I matched the donation, and we did something for, I think, St. Jude's, and something for related to animals, things that were appropriate for someone her age that she came up with. And of course, she got letters in the mail thanking her for her generosity, and there was lessons in there. And I thought I was Father of the Year. I thought, man, I have just absolutely crushed this. But let me confess that this plan was mostly a total fail. And I'll tell you why. I didn't expect it to be. I thought this was really a win.
Well, because it sounds great so far.
It sounds great. I thought it was a really good way to teach the value of a dollar. It didn't work for a variety of reasons. First of all, when we got her first bank statements, and I showed it to her, and I said, look, you've built it. She saw a penny of interest. And she kind of looked at me and said, why would I put money there to get such a meaningless amount when I could have done something I enjoyed with the money? And she was right, quite candidly. There's a reason why we don't why we don't store all of our money in a savings account earning nothing. She was right. And I couldn't argue with the logic, but I said, it's because there may be something that down the road you want to consider or purchase, and you'll have money waiting for you. And so that I felt was pretty good. But that was, to me, a sign, first of all, that she was bright, but second of all, that the need for fun money just didn't exist. Dominic, we are in a position, we are very blessed, have made a great living, and she doesn't go without. And the value of a dollar is really lost on her. And not because I certainly tried. I will say that she's cautious and thoughtful around her spending. She is not a shopper. She is not a spender. But almost if there's something that needs to happen or wants to happen, there's no question it's going to happen. Whether it's schooling, whether it's camps, whether it's opportunities or experiences or a vacation. And so I actually am terribly, deeply concerned that she has no idea what she's signing up for when she eventually gets to college and beyond, because she has no idea how hard it is to make the kind of living that she's used to living.
Right, sure.
So, the effort was there. The thought was behind it. I really was a proud papa.
Yeah.
But it only lasted about 1.5 years, 2 years, after which she didn't need an allowance because it didn't matter to her. And there was just it just didn't work. And that's not on her. And it's, I don't think, on me. I think it's just the reality when you're in a position where you're very fortunate and you understand it. And the good news is she's very appreciative.
Yeah.
She is very appreciative, and she knows the blessings that she has, and she knows that means she has some responsibility that she carries with that. So that's a good thing. I think there's some money ethics in there. There's some integrity in there.
Yeah, right.
But in terms of understanding and having any clue what it takes to create financially the kind of life that she has lived, she has no idea.
That's really interesting, right? So that's great that because it sounds like she doesn't have the sense of entitlement that you might worry about if you've been fortunate enough to grow up in a world of relative privilege. And we're not talking ultra rich, right? But just, sounds like upper middle class, the things that she needed were available to her, and she's, got lots of options, and you're taking trips or whatever things you're doing, right? Nice quality of life, nothing super special, but good, right? But still relative privilege. And so she's appreciative of that, which is great. But that's a really good point that you bring up, that's not the same as someday having to either create that for yourself, right? Find the money, earn the money to create that for yourself, or suddenly learn how to live a different lifestyle without. And both of those things can be pretty challenging. So that's interesting.
She did not grow up staying in the types of motels that I did when we were fortunate enough to go away. She grew up staying in a nice place and traveling in a certain way and being able to go see a show or take something in that maybe we would have had to pass on. She's never been in the bleachers with a hot dog, Dominic. She's always had the kind of seats that people would be like, man, how'd she? So it feels like a parenting fail, and it's not deliberate. It's just that I want her to have a better childhood than I did. Financially, she does. I think she's got a great life. I think, in fact, my wife and I talked yesterday about our daughter's life is kind of amazing. She's a good kid. I mean, she's a teenager. So do you have teenagers? Have you ever been through this with teenagers?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
All right. So she's a teenager, which means her friends are more important to her than her folks now.
And then everything, yeah.
She was like my best friend, and now I've missed my best friend because she'd rather hang out with other people. And
Yep.
I think her dad's pretty cool, but she apparently doesn't anymore. But that's normal. And again, that's on me to recognize that that's healthy and normal.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what's going to happen financially. I do know that she's a musical theater kid, which means by definition, she's unlikely to earn the kind of living that I do as a wealth manager and financial advisor if she's in theater, unless, of course, she's a Broadway star, which is her plan, by the way. So if you ever see my last name on a Broadway billboard, it's my daughter, not me. But there's going to be some adjustment.
Yeah.
And I want to help, grease those skids, but not create a trust baby. We help our clients with this all the time. How do we not ruin our kids? If I were to drop dead tomorrow, or if my wife and I, heaven forbid, were to drop dead tomorrow, in what condition would we be leaving our only child? And parents have to think about this, because if your kid is 20 or 22 or 25 and you leave behind something significant, whatever significant is to you, something that could be considered game-changing for someone, you can actually ruin them.
Yeah.
You can eliminate the work ethic and the desire to thrive. On the other hand, you don't want to leave nothing behind and have them struggle and bootstrap necessarily their whole lives. So there's ways to plan around that, and we actually help folks with that almost every day. And I think about it a lot because I want to leave everybody in a good place when it's my turn, but I also don't want to have it be destructive in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, do a sponsorship ad. Today's episode is sponsored by Travel Multiplier. Do you think travel hacking sounds too good to be true? That you have to fly last minute or stand by, and then you got to stay in some sort of weird back alley hotels? I used to have the same concerns, but it's real and doable to travel with all sorts of options and perks, including flying first class, staying in luxury hotels, all-inclusive resorts, and all for free once you really know how to make the most of your rewards points. It'll change how you travel forever. Use the affiliate link in the show notes or go to fiforkids.com and click on the Travel Multiplier link to download the free guide, The Skeptic's Guide to Travel Hacking, and it'll debunk the 7 biggest myths that are keeping people from flying, staying, and exploring the world for free. Thanks to Travel Multiplier for sponsoring this episode. So what are your thoughts about how you're going to help her then sort of going forward? So she's still at home. She hasn't graduated yet.
Right.
What then are you thinking about trying to help set her up for success as she does leave the house and goes out, especially if she wants to pursue the career in musical theater? And there are lots of ways she can do that, right? I mean, obviously, of course, right, she want like a if you've got a kid who is really into athletics and they want to be a big sports star, of course they want to be, whatever it is, right? The goalie for the Flyers, right? Or they want to play for the Yankees or whatever.
Nobody wants to be the goalie for the Flyers. As much as I love them, nobody wants to be the goalie for the Flyers. That's a tough gig, but I get your point.
Yeah. So, right, but they want to, but also, right, but that's so many things play into that are outside of each individual's control, right? And so, but within that, there are lots of career options within theater, musical theater, sports, that kids don't necessarily, that they're not even aware of. So I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are as to how to help sort of guide her as she gets to a point where she's trying to navigate that path. And again, back to how is she, because at some point she's going to have to decide to balance out, okay, here are the things, here's how I really want to spend my time. This is what lights me up. But I also have to, the practicalities of being able to support myself and make a living. How do I balance those two? How do I mix them? What are your thoughts about how to help her?
Well, right now, the first thought is that she is going to continue her education beyond high school. There will be some form of college experience, and I'm going to do what I have to do to make sure that she graduates without loans so that she's not starting at negative something. She's at zero, not at negative. That feels important to me because that way she's not making decisions under duress. She's got some choice. But the second thing, and I think that's just as important, is to help guide her in terms of where to go to school and maybe what to study. There's a difference between going to a conservatory where you study music all day long or art all day long and going to a university where you major in theater but also study physics or engineering or other things. And so I think it would be wise for her to have some fallback base education in something else while still chasing her passion 100%. And so we are exploring all those different options. I say we because it does take a village. Applying to college today is not like it was back in the day. I applied to 4 schools. I had to write 10 essays, but I applied to 4 schools, and that was that. Kids today are applying to 25 and 30 schools because it's so hyper competitive, particularly if you also have to audition to get into a program, which these kids do.
Yeah, sure.
And all of the counselors are telling us that this process begins the summer after sophomore year for artists in the way that sometimes it does for athletes.
Interesting.
Because they actually do other things to get noticed in a very crowded and very difficult industry. So it's not like somebody who wants to go study philosophy or poli-sci or history or English or even economics or whatever. You don't have to do that. So you wait until you get your SAT scores and you finish your junior year and you apply to a couple of schools and you pick one that's academically and socially where you want to be. It's totally different if you have to audition or try out or qualify, not just academically, but also sort of semi-professionally. So trying to make that process as non-stressful as possible so that I don't want a stressed 15 or 16-year-old kid. That's not, and she's not. Thankfully, she's not. And I would like to try and keep it that way. And my wife's doing 90%, 95 in case she listens to this, % of the work on this. But it does seem to me like the things that we can do as parents are try and take care of the financials in such a way that she's not going to start in a hole. Because kids who are getting liberal arts degrees and going 50 or 60 or 80 or $100,000 in debt are not doing themselves any favors.
Yeah, right.
It's one thing to take a big loan for law school or med school or business school. It is a whole nother thing to do that to get a basic liberal arts degree someplace. It just doesn't make sense. And it does create a serious disadvantage in terms of seeking jobs, in terms of making decisions. And by the way, you lose at least one doubling of your money. So if you think about the rule of 72, if the rule of 72 says that if you average 7%, and that's not financial or investment advice, of course, but if you were to average 7%, every 10 years your money would double. But if you're paying student loans off and it takes you a decade to do that, you've lost one doubling.
Yeah.
So if you have 5 doublings during your career, during your adulthood, and $100,000 becomes $200 and then $400 and then $800 and then 1.6 and then 3.2, if you start at that student loan, what you're losing isn't the 100. It's the 1.6 to the 3.2. It's a huge number.
Yes, right.
So starting in a hole is devastating to long-term financial independence. And student loans, I understand where they came from. They've been bastardized, again, in my opinion. And when you start talking about financial education, financial literacy, financial independence, and teaching kids about this, being in a position to avoid loans, whether it means community college, whether it means trade school, whether it means choosing an in-state school rather than some fancy liberal arts play, whatever the family has to do to make this work so that you're not losing a decade of money doubling and as an adult is a very big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was a great example that you gave, right? Because that's if you really understand that whole power of doubling, and that's the huge value of starting that process when you're young, because now, even though you're not dumping as much money in as you can when you're in your 50s and your peak earning years, let's say, you've got that time, right? And so, and that's important. You're not losing the doubling on the front end. It's the back end because you've lost that 5th double. Right. So it's not that you were not going to put in $1.6 million when you were in your 20s, but you're going to lose that on the back end. So it's a huge deal. And it's also, I just want to say, and I understand you're not saying this, but it's not that a liberal arts education is a bad thing. It's a great thing in so many ways, right? It teaches you to communicate and to think and makes you well-rounded and all these great things that are great for society as a whole and great for the individual. But I think your point is, and this is, again, goes back to everything we do ties in with money in our lives. And if you pursue that, right, as I did with my first degree, which was an English Lit degree, which is, I will still say to this day, one of the top 5 best things I ever did, right?
I have the same degree.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah. No, I have an English degree, and I think it helps with communication and writing and speaking and all these things, and researching and
critical thinking,
digesting a lot of information.
Yes.
I think it was. I love the liberal arts. I'm definitely not beating on a liberal arts education whatsoever.
Right.
I just don't think you should be $100,000 in the hole when you finish one.
Well, absolutely, because of all the reasons you just said, right? And so
Right.
if you're going to pursue that, which I think we both agree is a great route to go, then you've also got to be thinking about what's my financial plan for that, right? Which is don't go to $100,000 into debt. And also then how am I going to make money sort of on the back end if I'm not a Broadway star, right? Like what's the puzzle? How do I fit that puzzle together for me?
I got teased by a lot of my peers when I was an English major. They were all studying finance or whatever. And what are you going to do with an English degree? And I always said, whatever I want.
That's right. Yep.
Anything. I can do anything with this degree, whereas you better like what you're doing because you are a one-trick pony. And again, I'm not beating on a finance degree either. I just think that there is having a broad base of knowledge and education and experience and is an insanely valuable thing. And so, yes, I do think it's worthwhile. But I don't think you have to go to the fanciest school you can get into just because they let you in. If it's going to put you under financial duress, it's a much bigger number than just the sticker price.
Yeah. Great point. So let's talk about the book. Don't retire, graduate. So since we're talking about schools, that was a good segue. I didn't plan
How about that? Look at that
great.
mortar board. Look at the mortar board on a pig. That pig is a student. Well, used to be.
So, just tell us about so I really like how you structured the book. I like how it's sort of set up like a 4-year university degree. And I think it's really cool how you cover such a broad range of things in there. And you've kind of set it up in kind of sort of a year by year sort of rubric, I guess, but you cover a lot of information. So maybe just talk about why you did the book, why all of this matters to you so much, and what you're trying to help people with all this information and why you structured it that way.
Dominic, that's about a 6-part question. I'm going to try and attack it one at a time. First things first, I wrote this book to be a personal financial literacy tool for almost anyone to be able to pick up and improve their financial lives. So the book itself was written where each chapter is a course: cash management, risk management, investment management, insurance management, all the various things. It's written not like a textbook at all. It's written in first person. It's written to be very accessible. It's not a hard read. At least I don't think it is. I hope it's not. And at the end of every chapter, there's an extra credit assignment. Because I don't believe in homework. Nobody likes homework, and everybody does extra credit. So an extra credit assignment at the end of every chapter, which if you do them all, by the time you're finished with the book, you will have a financial plan. So it allows you to sort of go through this process, and some of it will be appropriate for you now, and some will be appropriate for you in the future. So talk about the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years of your financial life. And I'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but the objective around this was to create a financial literacy tool that people who either didn't have a financial advisor or didn't think they could afford a financial advisor, or frankly don't yet need and aren't yet ready for a financial advisor, could begin to make some of these good decisions on their own and then determine when it's time to plug in some assistance, some advice, some help along the way. Freshman year of your financial life is a lot around dealing with the cost of education and student loans and maybe some debt issues and cash management and basic budgeting. And on my show, on Don't Retire, Graduate, we refer to budget as the B word. I don't let anybody say it on my show, so I apologize for saying it on your show. But basically it is figuring out what's coming in, what's going out, and how to manage some basic cash management, basic budgeting skills. By the time you're in sophomore year, now you're thinking about some major life decisions that happen at that stage of your life. Am I going to get married or be in a partnership? Am I going to become a parent? Will there be children? Am I going to buy a home or continue to rent? Like some of these big decisions that do change your trajectory and cause you to have to make some different decisions and think a little differently. And how do you navigate that? How do you know if you're ready to buy a house? You're never ready, by the way, to have children. But how do you know if you're ready to buy a house? Junior year, now you're into the swing of things. You've built a career. Yeah, maybe you're in your higher earning years. You have some new challenges. One is you're very busy. You've got parents getting older to worry about. You've got kids to educate. You're working 50 or 60 hours a week. You've got tax issues. You're building an investment portfolio that's now more complicated that maybe you need some more help on. And so that's really that's where people most of the time will jump in and say, I've got to have somebody. I think it's beneficial in your freshman or sophomore years, but by junior year, it really does make sense. And then senior year is about the things that are more important than money, how you're going to spend your retirement. And we could talk about what that means, but also things like elder care, things like the decisions you have to make around Social Security, around Medicare, around some of those things, but also what you want to leave behind, what your legacy is going to be. So to me, retirement has to be changed. The whole book is about not retiring. Because retirement in its traditional sense is terrible. No one should do it. No one should go from 50 or 60 hours a week of being at the top of your game and being plugged in to the universe in lots of ways to daytime TV and shuffleboard. It's a disaster, and people don't live very long.
Right.
And so people who are counting down the days or months until they retire and then retire wind up bored out of their minds in a very big hurry. And so, I've sort of discovered over the years the secrets of the happiest retirees. We've helped hundreds of couples and individuals retire over the years, maybe 1,000 plus. And they all have some stuff in common. One is that they're debt-free. And we can argue all day about whether there's good debt and bad debt. Of course there is, and there's leverage and for buying a business or maybe a house, or there's some debt that's okay, and then there's consumer debt, which by definition is terrible. But the happiest retirees don't owe anybody anything. The other thing is that they have their health. They've taken care of themselves enough to enjoy their lives.
Right.
You can be as wealthy as you want, but if you can't get out of bed or you can't leave the house or you can't take the trip or you can't play with your grandkid, what's it worth? It's worth nothing. Right. Money does not matter at all if you're not healthy enough to enjoy your life. So they've taken care of themselves, and you don't just wake up one day and decide, today I'm going to be healthy. I mean, I guess you could, in theory, you could begin a new track, but generally that's a spectrum. It's a journey. So I think you don't wake up one day and decide, today I'm going to be wealthy. You build wealth over time. Well, you build health over time, and you create good habits.
Yep.
And then the
very
third,
similar. I talk about that a lot, actually, Eric.
The
similarities, but they're the similarities between those two, because to me they're the same. It's all about consistency and action over time, and you build it, right? I mean, so they're very much the same type of thing to me. But anyway, sorry.
Absolutely, and that makes your financial advisor your trainer in the gym.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
We all know how to do sit-ups and push-ups, but if you don't have an appointment with the trainer, you might not show up, and you might not drop and give them 20 because it's just you, and it's too easy to walk away unless you have somebody telling you what to do. So that's sort of that's a tangent. But the third thing, and the single most important thing for anyone considering retirement in any sense, is to have a sense of purpose, to continue to have a reason to get out of bed every morning that is more than golf. It's more than visiting with family. All those things are wonderful if that's what you're into. Hobbies are important. But you also have to have a purpose. Your LinkedIn page can never just say retired, because at that point it might as well say deceased. You have unplugged from the world. You are no longer a member. You're not retired. You're a volunteer and a hockey fan and a grandparent and whatever else. You're lots of things, but you're not just retired. And so to me, we have to define retirement as the absence of needing to work, not the absence of work itself. So financial independence is wonderful, whether you're 25 or 85 when you get there. It's a wonderful goal, and it's worth doing, so that work becomes optional. If work is optional, that does not mean sit home. It means find things that fuel you, find things that fill your tank, that excite you. And it could be working at the food bank. It could be working at a camp or something with kids. It could be volunteering at a senior center. It can be anything you want. It can be hobbies. It can be volunteerism. It can be boards. It can be consulting. It could be part-time work. It can be anything you want, but don't just sit home, because you will not live very long. And it is so sad to see people who have worked their whole lives to reach the golden years and then realize the gold is fool's gold, because it's awful.
Yeah.
They're unhappy.
They have nothing. You still have to, because even when you reach financial independence at any age, right?
At any age.
Young or old, you still have all of the same issues. You still have whatever sort of personal struggles, anxieties, good things, bad things that you sort of have to work out. You still have to manage your time. And if you don't manage your time, that's where you sit around and do nothing.
That's right.
And then you get miserable, right? And then your health goes, and then it's a downward cycle, right? Because as you don't take care of yourself, because now you're not being forced some sort of discipline structure externally from a job, then you're not exercising, or your eating goes down the drain, and then you're just sitting around, you're not doing anything, you have no sense of purpose, and life just gets worse and worse, and you're miserable all of a sudden, instead of, okay, I don't have to work, but I still have all this time. What am I going to do with it? Well, let me do the things that bring me meaning and joy.
And joy.
That's right.
Joy
and I
is
can
a
be
word
more
we don't
flexible
use
with
enough.
it, but
Right.
I still have to do those things. And if you do that, then you can continue to have a fulfilling and joyful life no matter what age you're at. Yeah.
The problem is that money is a little bit, it's a lot like oxygen. If you have enough, you don't think about it, ever.
Right.
If you don't have enough, it's all you think about.
Yeah.
And so if you have money problems, if you have money stress, if you have money pressures that are building up for you, it's hard to think about or do anything else. And so to be able to alleviate that, if you're an employer, you can help alleviate that for your employees with financial wellness and some other types of things. If you're a parent, you can help your kids not carry that stress. If you're a kid, you can help your aging parent not have some of that stress in a perfect world. But financial independence alleviates the worry that there's not enough oxygen in your lungs. It doesn't mean don't do anything. It means this is now one box that's checked so we can go do the things that fill our tank, that bring us joy. And if you're in a position where you don't have to work for the money, then work for the joy. Do something you love. You know, if you've been an architect your whole life, it doesn't mean you have to keep building bridges, but you could volunteer at a program. You could teach at an architecture school. You could take on, a couple of projects a year just to stay relevant and stay in the game. You could be a mentor for young architects. And I'm making this up. It could be any industry.
Yeah.
But why not use your wisdom? If you're familiar with the book From Strength to Strength, I don't know if you've ever read that.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It is sensational, and I cannot remember the author's name, and I apologize to the author, but it's called From Strength to Strength, and it talks about how when we're young, we trade on the intelligence curve, and as we get older, we jump to a wisdom curve. And it's a beautiful, amazing book, and it actually says that pendulum moves around age 35, which is a little terrifying, but it's entirely true. And so within our organization, we try to pair up a financial advisor in their 20s with one in their 40s or 50s, because one of them has just completed all of the latest, greatest technical,
Yes.
They know it off the top of their heads, and one of them has seen some stuff. They've lived through what really happens. They've walked people through some really hard times and some really great times. And if you can put those two things together, you become an incredible team, and that's true in any industry. You need, and I used architecture a minute ago, you need somebody who knows the latest and greatest building techniques and design techniques, but you also need somebody who's seen projects go wrong and some projects go right, and who's worked through this and understands how it works and has some of the relationships. And so I think you don't become less relevant as you get older. This country, we put old people out to pasture. We put seniors out to pasture. Every other culture that I ever knew of, the elders in the village have the biggest tent, Dominic. They're the ones you go to with the really big issues. You go to the elders' tents. Here, we put them out to pasture like they're not useful. And it's just when you reach a certain point, maybe you don't have the same intelligence curve going anymore. Maybe you're not at the top of your game academically. I'm sure there's some 70-year-old dentists out there who don't know the latest and greatest technology in the dental community, but they know how bedside manner works and how to take care of people and what people are worried about and how to allay fears and maybe pain relief and other stuff. And they can get a 30-year-old dentist to be in their practice who's going to say, no, this is the way you use the most modern technology and the most modern techniques. Now let's put these things together. And so if you have somebody who's a little older who has the wisdom, and you have somebody who's a little younger who has the knowledge, and it's not all about age, some of it's experience and other things. But if you were to do that in almost any industry, I think you can be at the absolute best because you cover both those bases. So that's what we try to do.
If you're financially independent, you also don't have to work as much if you don't want to, right? So you can pick and choose. If we use your architect example, and you just want to take on a couple of projects a year just because you like doing it, you can pick and choose, and you can pick projects that seem interesting to you and that allow you to explore or make the most of whatever parts of architecture really always gave you the most fulfillment, right? So if you really
Correct.
like small creative projects, then you do a couple of those, and so you're still doing something.
That's
You're
right.
still getting meaning, but you also have more flexibility. You don't have, because as you get older in particular, like, I don't want to work as hard, even though I still want to do it, but you still can have value, right? For others and yourself. So I think that's great.
Well, I'm also learning in my 50s, I'm learning energy management. Personal energy management. I know when I'm at my best by the day, by the times of the day, and when I should be doing the things that create the most impact. And I know when I'm not at my best. The biorhythms they're real. And so you know when you should work out, or when you should eat, or when you should do a presentation, and I've learned so much of that over 3+ decades that I don't work the kinds of hours I used to. But I think incredibly efficient and effective and productive by managing that to my strengths rather than trying to just plow through. I mean, if you're again, use the dental piece. If you're an older dentist and you've got to see 48 patients in a day, I don't care who you are, there's going to come a point where you're dragging a little bit and it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
But if you were to say, I'm going to be in the office from 9 to 1, you're going to be able to take great care of everybody and still have that balance that you need, particularly if you don't need the money.
That's right.
If you don't need the money, if you're financially independent, you can work part-time, you can be part of a team. You don't have to squeeze every nickel out of a deal, and that, I think, is a lot better for you.
Yeah. And the people that I know that have been able to retire early, they've moved on to other things that they're interested in, whether they're related to what they did as a career or there's something totally separate, but that they always wanted to do. And I mean, and everyone I know that's done that, they're just as busy as they were before. They're just busy they just have more control and choice over how they're spending that time. And they're just busy doing things that are meaningful and bring more joy to them. And so, right. And that's where you want to be. At whatever age.
My mother's 79 years old, and she's been retired by definition for close to 15 years. She's busy. I got to get on her calendar because she's running the alumni events, and she's volunteering here and there and everywhere, and she's active, and she's busy, and she's happy, and that matters. It's so important to stay engaged.
Yes, so she's 79 years young is what you're saying.
Well, it's a little corny, Dominic. I'm not going there. But yes, she's 79 and thriving, and that's what matters to me.
Yeah. No, that's a better way to put it. Okay. So I want to come back around and have you say it one more time because I think it's so great. And then we'll wrap up. Give your analogy for money and oxygen one more time.
Sure. I consider money to be a lot like oxygen in the sense that when you have enough of it, you don't think about it. It's just not something you worry about. And when you don't have enough, it's hard to think about anything else. If you're at work one day and you're sitting there trying to work on a work project and you're worried about how you're going to make a car payment or pay for your kids' tuition or their braces or whatever it is in life, that's all you're thinking about. You are not focused on anything else but the money. That means you're not plugged in socially. It means you're not plugged in professionally. It means you're not at your best, and it weighs on you. It's brutal to be in that position. And so anything we can do to help ourselves, or if we're in a position to help other people with this, anything we can do so that there's enough oxygen in the room for everybody and that you don't have to worry about it is a big deal. And, we see a lot of employers who want their employees to be able to focus on work when they're at work, and they create financial wellness offerings. And we do a lot of that kind of work where we can be that accountability partner without them necessarily having to run out and hire someone. And that's a big deal. It creates an incredible deep breath. Now I'm using deep breath to talk about the money again. It's the oxygen. But it does, because if you get some clarity or some solution or some direction on how you're going to handle that house purchase or that tuition issue or whatever the money situation is you're dealing with, or even runaway debt, if you can get some help around it, it can give you that bandwidth to then get on with your life. And we all make mistakes, and we're going to make them, and some of them are financial mistakes, and we have to thrive through them We have to dust ourselves off, pick ourselves up, and keep going. And hopefully people will take that to heart and begin that financial literacy journey. You cannot wait. It will not be easier tomorrow than it is today. It will never be easier than it is this moment. And the perfect time to start investing is always yesterday or 10 years ago or 30 years ago. But if you don't have that ability, and none of us do, then start immediately. Start making good habits, and they will take care of you the rest of your life, whether you're 25 today or 55. It will be easier if you're 25, but it's not impossible if you're 55.
Right. Right. Well, and the advantage you have at 55, hopefully, is you're able to you're behind on time, but you can throw more money at it. And it's not as good, but it's the next best. So like you said, start now, because it's still going to set you up for the future, right? It's still going to put you in a better position 10, 20 years from now than you're in now. So
correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
So great advice, Eric. So the book is Don't Retire, Graduate. I'll put a link for that in the show notes. I encourage people to get it and read it. And it is an easy read. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really enjoying it so far. So thank you, Eric, for doing that.
Well, thank you for saying so.
And where can people find you if anyone wants to reach out?
Well, for folks who want to check out what we do at BFG, you can go to bfgfa.com. And for people who want to check out the book, you can go to don'tretiregraduatebook.com and buy it right online.
And you've got a podcast too, is that right?
We do. And if you go to don'tretiregraduate.com, you'll find the podcast. We have 6 seasons done. Our finale will go live here in December of 25, and we're starting a 7th season. We've got some great guests lined up, and it's been a ton of fun. I'm meeting some great people and having some really authentic conversations with folks about their money journeys.
Yeah, great. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Great to visit with you and get to know you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FI for Kids podcast. Please support the show by hitting subscribe and receive new episodes every Thursday. The intro and exit music this episode are courtesy of Douglas Cameron. As always, you can find links to the FI for Kids music in the show notes. Thanks again, and we'll talk next week.
Like the horizon, I can't reach you, you're so far away. And if I run to the place I want you to stay, you'd be gone. I've been left wondering why you moved on, and why you never said goodbye. I can't wait any longer. I see the writing on the wall. It's time for us to say, tomorrow we are yesterday. Tomorrow we are yesterday. You're like the sunset, you're glowing